Okay, just a minute. So you are seeing the desktop folders.
Yes, right.
So now I clicked open this presentation. Are you able to see it?
No, it's still so.
Still, it shows this one.
Yes. Uh, once. Is it open at your end? Is it open?
Yeah, it's open actually.
But I couldn't see.
So you are seeing only the desktop folders.
Yes.
So just I will stop share again, and then I will see like. So is that now?
No, not it.
Not it. So I have to choose the file. If I go to file, it comes like. So now.
No. Yes, I could see.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you please maximize the screen?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yes, fine.
That's good. So is that okay now?
Yes, it's okay. Can you please move to next slide?
Yes. So is that working?
Yes, working fine. Ma'am, shall we start?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, all, and I welcome Dr. Saumani Kumaran for being part of today's session. She is the founder of Protogeny Biotech LLP, a Chennai-based biotech service sector in the protein biological field. So I know her personally. We were worked together for a couple of years. I could say she is very dedicated and a passionate person. So she is expertise in molecular biology and microbiology, bioinformatics, and immunology. So she is doing a service in recombinant protein production and purification, gene cloning, and gene sequencing, etc. So she is also one of our potential startup, I could say. So come back to us. We CIC, Crescent Innovation and Incubation Council, one-stop shop business technology incubator. So located at BS Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. So we currently focused on three thrust areas like life science, industry 4.0, and mobility and transportation. So we have already incubated 39 startups and 21 student startups. Mm. So we supported startups like in terms of getting funds and investors. So we can also do the IPR service and mentoring service also. So I once again thank you all. Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello,
Can you,
Dinesh.
yeah, can you proceed? Yeah, you can proceed.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Good evening. And I personally thank Mr. Parvesh for giving the opportunity and his team for the kind support. Uh, so actually, ours is a biotech service sector startup. So we are located in Chennai, and we do services for the recombinant cloning, site-directed mutagenesis, and protein production and purification in E. coli and the Pichia host system. And we also carry out some for the NMR or the mass spec studies. If you need a specifically labeled protein, also we produce them using the minimal media. And then if some of the bacterial metabolites LPS or the polymyxins, if some other people require some kind of bacterial metabolites, we also can do the service for them. And then we do other some regular DNA sequencing and other molecular biology and microbiology services. So this is our core service area is the recombinant cloning this thing. And the other service sectors, we do this kind of antimicrobial assays, PCR, RT-PCR studies, and DNA sequencing, and inclusion body refolding studies. These are the other related services we carry out in our company. So now if you guys have some requirements for any of this kind of services, please do contact us and please visit our website, and we will be able to guide you to get good quality proteins. And coming to our topic, actually the recombinant protein expression in E. coli. So proteins are like an important class of biological macromolecules, which are polymers of amino acids. They are called as the biological workhorses. So DNA gives the instruction, but the instruction is carried out by the RNA, and which in turn produce the proteins. And proteins are the actual workhorses in our body or whatever the system. So we need to study any system, any studies, we need a very good quality proteins. So, and proteins have the 4 distinguished levels: structural organization, primary structure, which is the linear chain amino acids. And this linear chain amino acids are formed into a secondary structure, alpha helix or beta sheets, based on their hydrogen bonding. And then these secondary structures come together to form a tertiary structure. And the tertiary structure, when it comes together, they form a quaternary structure. This is just a brief intro about the proteins and their the structural level organizations. And as I mentioned already, they are the biological workhorses. So most of every biochemical process which is happening in our body are mainly proteins, and they also play a central role in disease and drug discovery. Now, with this COVID situation, everybody will be aware of this spike protein and plasma therapy based on the antibodies or the nucleocapsid proteins, and the different pharmaceutical inventions of the different protein levels in the virus, the COVID virus. So this protein production is very important and very a necessity for the modern day research. And the functionally good proteins are required for every aspect of this molecular biology or the structural biology study, enzyme function, to study the protein interaction partners. All these things require a very good quality protein. However, this most interesting molecules in biology are also the most complex and challenging study. We don't have a one approach which fits all the proteins, because each protein is unique, and we need a different approach to get a good quality protein. For different proteins, we cannot use the same protein. Okay, I found this protocol, so and this protocol will be fit to all the proteins. That is not the case. So that's why they are very tricky, and we have to use this different aspects to get from the molecular biology aspect, from the bacterial aspects, and the purification aspects. We have to interplay several things to get a very good quality proteins. Today we will briefly discuss the recombinant protein expression in E. coli. So first of all, why we need a recombinant protein? Because the let us take an example for insulin. Okay, so insulin, this is the quantity we actually want, but after sacrificing the, like from the native source, if you are producing, so we are getting only this much. So what is the solution for it? Then comes this, there comes the recombinant DNA technology. There comes the recombinant DNA technology. Without sacrificing these innocent creatures, we can produce the large quantity of the protein which are required for our society. So this is the recombinant protein production overview. Like if we want to produce a protein, first we have to have a construct from the DNA level. So we have to we have to get the foreign DNA, that is the gene of interest, our gene of interest, and we have to introduce this gene of interest into a plasmid DNA. Plasmid is usually a vector actually, which carries the foreign DNA. And this recombinant DNA are introduced into a host cell. The host cells are the factories where the protein expression takes place. And from there, like we will get the desired products, and this desired products will be like purified based on the nature. So this is the general overview of the recombinant protein production. First, we have to get the gene of interest, and this gene of interest we have to introduce into the plasmid. And this recombinant DNA should be introduced into a host cell, where this the host cell acts as a factory to produce this protein. And so, like the first step is to get the clone. So that cloning like involves like some steps. So first we have to we have to produce the gene of interest, and using restriction digestion enzyme, we have to cut the insert, and the plasmid we have to use, which is a vehicle for the foreign DNA. The plasmid also we have to cut with the same restriction enzyme, and then we have to do the ligation of the sticky ends. So this clone will be produced, and this clone will be like inserted into a bacteria, and this will be amplified, and this clone will be used for the further like the protein production and purification. How to get the clone and what are the important elements involved in this recombinant DNA, like the cloning. So we will like follow one by one. So before like going for the like cloning and all these things, so we have to know like some factors to decide which plasmid or which method we have to use to produce the protein. So for that, we have to understand the properties of the protein, whether it is a membrane protein or it's a single domain protein or it's a multi-domain protein, what is the size of the protein, and does the protein require any post-translational modification like glycosylation or like disulfide bond formation, phosphorylation, something like that, and how toxic is the protein, and what is the end use of the protein. Because if you want to study for a R&D purpose, then the end use will be different, and if you want to give for as a therapeutic protein, then we have to be much more careful, like because this will be like used for some kind of treatment. So first we have to understand the protein like we are studying. So then like based on this, we can choose which expression vector. Vector is a thing which carries our gene into the system. So we have to decide which expression vector we have to use, and what is the host. As I said, the factory, right? That host, which one will be the the best one to get the good quality protein. We have to decide which host system, and in the host also like which location, whether it is a cytoplasm or a periplasm in case of bacteria, we have to decide. And what is the purification method we will be like we will have like, and we can like follow, like that also we have to think. So these are the properties which we have to consider before starting this cloning experiments. So like let us talk about this vectors. So vectors, as I said, they are like DNA molecules which carries the foreign DNA. The foreign DNA in our case is the gene of interest, the protein, like the corresponding DNA sequence of a protein. So, and this vector deliver this gene into the cell, because normally when you introduce a gene, like it will be cleaved by the host cell. So to prevent this, we need a vector, we need a transport vehicle, so which will be like safe inside the organism, and then it can produce multiple copies, and then they redirect the host to produce the protein of interest. So there are some properties a vector should have. It should be small enough to manipulate in a lab. It should not be like, if it is a huge DNA, then it will be difficult to use in our lab. So, and they should be self-replicating in an appropriate host. Whatever host we are using, this DNA should be able to replicate, because then only like we will get multiple copies, and then we will be able to produce our protein. And they should be like able to survive inside the host cell. And for selection, they should have a recognizable genetic marker, like for example, antibiotics like kanamycin, like those kind of markers like should be there. And it should also ensure the genetic expression of the genes. And most important vectors are plasmids, bacteriophages, cosmids, and artificial chromosomes. So this actually, like the plasmids are the one which we will be focusing, and they are the most commonly used vectors. So there are also other vectors like called the bacteriophages, plasmids, and this selection of the vector is based on like several criteria. For example, if you have a small insert 6 to 12 kb, like we can use just bacterial plasmids. But if you have a like large DNA to be cloned, then we have to go for the other vector, the bacteriophage vectors and the cosmid vectors. So they have given the different size of the inserts which will be like allowed in each type. So based on the requirement of your gene size, like we can choose the vector. So this is the most commonly used vector, the plasmids. So because the genetic information of this E. coli things are much more available, and so we can tune this the host system to produce more protein. So that's why like it's a very important host, and the bacterial plasmid vectors are the most commonly used also in the regular R&D purpose. So let us study in detail about this plasmid. So this is a circular, so this is a genomic DNA, which is here, and this is the plasmids or the circular plasmids. So they are the extra chromosomal DNA. So they should be like some characteristics should be there, like to become as a plasmid. So it should be able to replicate in an E. coli, like otherwise this will be lost when the next generation comes. So it should be able to replicate, and for that we should have an origin of replication. So a plasmid should have an origin of replication. If you are expressing in bacteria, it should have a prokaryotic origin of replication. So some vectors like will have a eukaryotic origin of replication also, because they will be used in mammalian cell cultures and all these things. And it should have a multiple unique cloning site. So this is like the origin of replication, and we should have a multiple cloning site. In this site only we will introduce the foreign DNA or the gene of interest. And then it should have a identifiable marker, because if there is no marker, because we cannot identify whether the bacteria has the clone or not. So we should have like some antibiotic resistant markers. So when the bacteria contains the plasmid, then it will be able to grow in in the antibiotic plate. If it is not, then it will not be able to grow in this condition. So basically for the cloning, we should have an origin of replication, and it should have a multiple unique cloning site, and it should have a antibiotic resistant marker or some enzyme which produces a color change. For example, the blue-white screening. So to identify whether it's a cloned the colony or not. So these kind of things are from the cloning point of view. We should have this kind of things in a plasmid. So, and the origin of replication, some origin of replication in a plasmid. For example, the PM, like the PUC vectors, they have more copy numbers. Like it produces 500 to like 700 plasmids per cycle of its replication. But there are like some plasmids which have like the moderate copy numbers, 15 to 20. Like for example, the PET vectors, they have the medium copy numbers, and there are like some plasmids which have like very less copy numbers. So in this, like we can see like the relaxed, or like what does it mean is like if it is a relaxed, the genomic DNA replication is different from the plasmid replication. The plasmid can replicate many times to produce the plasmid. But if it is a stringent, only like when the genomic DNA replication happens, that time alone, like the plasmid also will be able to. So depending on the use, like for example, for a expression point of view, we don't need a multi like higher copy numbers. But if you want to use this for a E. coli mammalian transfection, then we need a large quantity of plasmid to transfect the cell lines. In that case, we need a high copy number plasmid. So depending on the usage, so we have to select whether we need a high copy number plasmid or a medium copy number plasmid. So from the cloning point of view, we need origin of replication, and then the like multiple cloning site and the selection marker. So then from the point of view of expression, so if you want like protein to be expressed in a E. coli, so then we need some other elements apart from the plasmid replications to initiate the protein expression. So they are usually like the repressor, promoters, SD Shine-Dalgarno sequence, and the coding sequence of this is your gene of interest, and then transcription terminators. So there are several changes like happening with this promoter to have a control over the protein expression in E. coli. So there is strong promoters, weak promoters, and there are several mutations done in the promoters like to enhance the protein expression. And then this Shine-Dalgarno sequence, because only like when the Shine-Dalgarno sequence is there, like the it will be able to start the translation effectively. And then we need appropriate stop codon, and that the distance between the Shine-Dalgarno sequence and the coding sequence is very important to carry out the translation. And then we have to introduce the stop codon, otherwise the protein expression will continue. And mostly in E. coli, the preferred stop codon is this one. And this TT also is very important, transcription termination, because it gives like stability to the mRNA. Because from DNA, it produces the mRNA, and then mRNA, it gives the protein, right? So if the mRNA is unstable, the E. coli machinery has to continuously work to produce more mRNA. So to have a like to have this mRNA stability, we usually like there is this transcription termination sequence, because it modifies the 3' end of the mRNA structurally. Thereby, it prevents the degradation of the mRNA. So the more proteins will be produced from the mRNA things. So there like different, they have done like different modifications in this promoter, repressor, these sequences to enable like the protein expression more and to have a stable protein expression. So some of the promoters are like, there are this E. coli promoters, which are recognized by the E. coli RNA promoters. E. coli RNA polymerase, LAC, TRP, TAC, all these things are the E. coli promoters. But there are like some viral promoters, which are recognized by the E. coli RNA polymerase. They are the lambda 5, lambda 7, T5, and those things. And there are like some RNA promoters which are recognized by its own RNA polymerase. For example, T7 promoter, which is commonly used in the PET expression system, which is widely used. So they have a T7 promoter, which is recognized by a T7 RNA polymerase, not by the E. coli RNA polymerase. So if you want to express this plasmids in a E. coli strain, we should have a strain which contains, which is able to produce a T7 RNA polymerase. So we cannot use all the bacterial strain. Only special strains which has the ability to produce the T7 RNA polymerase can be used with this vector. So these points also we have to be like careful, because once when we choose the plasmid, and then if we want to express those things, we have to give importance, like otherwise like it will be a waste of work. And some synthetic promoters are also like produced. They are like fusion of like this LAC and TRP promoters, Like that, they produce some fusion synthetic promoters as well. So some commercial vectors family, like there are like PET vectors, PGX vectors, PQV vectors, like depending on your need, we can choose like the different types of vectors. Like for example, when we use, like the most commonly used is the PET vectors, because the PET vectors, the plasmids and the strains, there are plenty of things are combinations are available. So we can play more with these plasmids and the expression strains. And with the T7, it has the T7 promoter control. So it is a very strong promoter. It can make up to 50% of the total cell protein to be your protein. So instead of producing the E. coli proteins, like it will be producing the E. coli protein, but it makes sure that your gene of interest is expressed in like 50 up to 50%. So you will get a lot of protein. So this is like one advantage of this, and then it is induced by like IPTG, and it's a strong control of expression is there, because before induction it should not be produced. So it has a strong control. These are some characteristics of the PET vectors. And simultaneously we have like other vectors called PBAD vectors. This will be like under the arabinose producing system. This will be under the control of PBAD promoters. So in this, in PET vector, like IPTG is the inducer, but here in this PBAD vector, like we have this arabinose as an inductor, right? And this is like um, it's not like a very strong promoter, because in some cases like we need less expression, because for example when you're doing with like membrane protein expression, and if you express a lot, it will be like it will be difficult to fold and those things. So it will be non-functional proteins will be produced. In some cases, like where you need to slow down the system, we have to choose the promoter accordingly. In case of soluble proteins, like if we go maximum yield, it should not be a problem. So based on your protein nature, we can select these vectors. Like, and there are like this vectors like PET or the PBAD, they have like some combinations of fusion tags also, which we will discuss a little bit later. And PQU also, like this also have a T5 promoter, which is recognized by the E. coli RNA polymerase. And this is also IPTG inducible. And they have like here in this PGX vector, they have a P tag, that's a hybrid promoter. So like they have also a fusion protein in this vector. So which enables the purification and the solubilization of the like protein also. So PQU or PBAD or the PET, depending on your protein of interest, like, so we can choose the, but the one thing is like, none of them guarantees actually. It's actually, you have to work it out and see whether this works or not. Which one is better, we cannot say based on the sequence or anything, but we can have some idea, like, and then we can go in choosing this vectors. So now like we know like the vectors, the plasmid vector, especially for the E. coli cloning, and like some characteristic like how the promoter should be like, and what is the distance between the Shine-Dalgarno sequence and the transcription terminator and those kind of stuff, and different types of options for the promoters. So now we have like little bit idea about this vectors, and then coming to the insert, your gene of interest. So this gene of insert also we have to like study before like starting the cloning, because it should make sense structurally. As I said, we have like the 4 different levels of structure, right? So you're like, for example, if you want to study the whole protein, then it is a different thing. But if you want to study like some particular domain or something, and if you want to cut this sequence, then we have to make sure that the gene sequence, it does not cut in the secondary structural elements or before the domain boundaries. So complete domain should be covered. Those things we have to like, it should make sense structurally, the design, the gene of interest. We have to select accordingly the region, because if you cut abruptly inside in between this secondary structural region, then like you will not be able to get a stable protein. So these things like we have to like because we have to give a bioinformatic analysis before, like if possible do a secondary structure prediction. If some structural homolog structures are available, combined with that, like to find the domain boundaries and all these things. And we have to be sure also when designing the insert, like for your cloning, it should be in frame, like because if there is a frame shift when you design a primer or something, if you have a frame shift, then it will lead to a different protein. So we have to be careful with the frame shift. And then like the sequence correction, and then what vector you have and what all the restriction sites available in a vector. So we have to choose wisely, like the restriction site, because some restriction enzymes are very expensive, and some when you do with the if you select two restriction enzymes, they may not be compatible during the digestion, and some will be like very expensive, and some will have like star activity. So these things like we have to consider when you are like what vector you have and what are the restriction sites available in a multiple cloning site. So with all this knowledge, we can select the restriction site to be inserted in your insert. So, and then like, yeah, so these things, if you consider at least some part, we can guarantee, okay, like I have like this part is will not cause a trouble in your cloning experiments. So, and the primer design is also like important in this construct, like in this insert production. We have to have a multiple approach. What are the PCR reaction parameters? From where you are getting the sequence? Is it from genomic DNA you are doing the sequence, or it's an already available plasmid you are taking the gene sequence? So, and then we have to consider the primer selection rules also, because then only like we will get a nice PCR product of your insert. So combining all these things plays an important role in primer design. So primers are usually like short complementary segments. So which when like when the DNA is denatured, this can be like this can bound to the your gene of interest, and then like in your further amplification, this will be like amplified. So this is a primer, and we have to like be very careful in the primer designing also to avoid problems with the PCR product. And so what are the primer designing strategies is like primer uniqueness, because so if your primer is not very unique, then it can bind to, like for example, if you are using a genomic DNA, then it can bind to some other places. So we should give a primer blast in NCBI, like then like you will know the primer uniqueness. And the primer length is also very important. If it is below like 18 nucleotides, then you will have a non-specific. And if it is long also, like it will be like a problematic thing to have a melting temperature, all this comparatively. So optimal primer length will be like 18 to 30 nucleotides. And the melting temperature also we should choose in this region of 55 to 70 degrees. And the annealing temperature should be like 5 degrees from the TM. Like when you are setting up the PCR reaction, this annealing temperature should be. So keeping all these things, we have to design our primer. And between the forward and the reverse primer, the temperature compatibility should be like there. It should not be, if forward primer is 65 and we cannot use like 75 in the reverse primer. So it should be around like 65, 68, something like within like 3 to 5 degrees. And GC content also, like it should be like 50 to 60%. And the primer should be like at the 3' end, we have to be like very careful with the primer design. If you want to introduce mutations and all, like if you want to change something, it should be introduced at the 5' end, not towards the 3' end. And we should avoid hairpins in primers. So it should not be like the 3' end of the primer should not bind somewhere in between the sequence. So these things we have to be careful. But there are like this primer designing primer 3 suits, or even the Sigma, like when you order, like they have a like when you put their sequence, they will show you like how much hairpin is there, like whether it forms any secondary structure, what is the melting temperature of that, like those kind of information we get. So with these things, like, and the length of the amplified region also, it should be important. So you have like forward and the reverse primer, the in between sequence, the gene, it should be 150 base pairs to the 10 kb. More than that, the PCR reaction, you will not be able to get a proper insert. So these things also, like we should think when you do, and like continuous structures of sequence T T T T or A, like that should not be there, like more than 4, like it should not be there. So these kind of things also we should consider before cloning, because later on, like it will avoid all this difficulties with your cloning and other studies. Like, so carefully plan these things, like the vector selection, the insert selection, and the primer designing. So each step is very important. And when you consider the insert, some insert, like for example, some proteins may be like very insoluble. In that case, we have to think of some fusion proteins. Like, so there are like fusions are used for multiple purposes. So for secretion, for solubility, to give stability to the protein, and sometimes also just for the purification purpose. So we need to add a small protein or a small amino acid groups, like to your protein of interest. So for example, here this Mali protein or the PELB protein, usually they will add to the N-terminus of your protein sequence, because like this will like help you to produce like to signal the protein into a periplasmic compartment. So it is mainly for the secretion purposes. And some proteins like GB1 or MBP, like they are usually for the solubility purposes. Some protein, to avoid this proteases action, like we add some fusion protein to prevent the degradation. And some protein, like some tags like his tag or like this MBP or the like, they are also used based on the purification purpose also. So we can select a fusion tag also when you're designing your insert. Think about like what kind of fusions it may require, like if it is a membrane protein or if it is a globular protein, based on your thing. If it is a very small protein, then it will be like proteolytically cleaved. Then you will think about like adding a big protein to your this thing. So like and some vectors, like also they have a pre-made a fusion partner. For example, this PGX series have GST, and PMAL series have the MBP protein. And several PET vectors also have like the histax and GST, thyrodoxin, and DSBA. Like this is for the if your protein of interest have the disulfide bond formation. So for this kind of criteria, uh, the vector companies have like evolved this kind of fusion. So like when you are like insert can be like introduced into this vector in alliance with the fusion tag. So now like you have decided on your the insert size also, like and these are also like the some of the fusion partners, like and their size, because sometimes like for example this MBP and all is a big protein. So after this, like we have to cleave the protein, otherwise this will be like also interfering. And for example, histag and all, it's a very small 6 to 10 amino acids. So even if it is there in your protein of interest, it should not be a big trouble. So like these are also like should be a criteria in selecting your tag, the fusion protein. And there are like possibilities also to cleave the protein once when you produce your protein in the host. So there are some chemical methods and some enzymatic methods. So, and some vectors, they will have this factor 10A site, enterokinase site, TEF protease site. So like the fusion protein will be cleaved once when it is produced. Like we can use this enzyme to cleave the fusion protein. So now like we know like the vector and the insert. So now like we have to utilize the other tool, like how to join this vector and the insert. So there comes this restriction endonucleases. So these restriction enzymes are enzymes for the manipulation of DNA, and they cut the DNA at specific sites. So they are discovered in E. coli, like E. coli, to resist the infection of the bacteriophages. This mechanism is used. And I should say these bacteria are like very important organisms in molecular biology, because they give lot of information. For example, like this restriction digestion, all these things are happening in the bacteria, and those things like we found out, and then like we use for our cloning purposes, right from this restriction enzymes, even the protein producing mechanisms, and the latest CRISPR-Cas9. All these things are like found in bacteria, which are like learnt by us and then developed into a technique. So actually this scientific community owe a lot to the bacteria and their mechanisms. So restriction enzymes, like the two main things, one is the recognition sequence and the cleavage pattern. So the recognition sequence is where the DNA cuts the, where the restriction enzyme cuts the DNA. Usually it will be a palindromic sequence. Palindromic is from both the strands, like in the 5'3' direction, if you see, like you will have that same sequence. So usually it is like 4 to 8 nucleotides, and the cleavage pattern. So like some restriction enzyme produces sticky ends and some produces a blunt end. So example is this, like for example, this is like the specific sequence recognized by the restriction enzyme, and they cut at the 5' like the 3' end cutting, and this is the 5' end cutting. In both the cases you will have a overhang, and this is the blunt end cutting. So in most of the cloning purposes we use the overhang cuttings. Now like the both the plasmid and the insert should be cut with the restriction endonucleases, and now like these are ready for the cloning. So now like we have the plasmid and we have the insert, and we selected whichever the restriction enzyme suitable in both the plasmid and the insert. And one thing is like we have to be careful in this, like our plasmid prep should be like you should do it properly, like when you are like centrifuging, pelleting down the cells, like you should not allow the media to, like when you're draining off the media, like it should be complete. Otherwise, like what happens is sometimes the restriction endonucleases does not work. So these things we have to be careful. Otherwise, like we will not be able to cleave the DNA, and then if we does not do the digestion, then like the cloning will not come actually. So these things like we have to be careful with the restriction enzyme, and we have to check before doing the large scale whether like these two are compatible or some star activity is there. So depending on that, like we have to like design whether we can do the restriction digestion with both the enzymes simultaneously, or first one we should do first with one restriction enzyme, and those things we have to play around. Like we have to follow the manual carefully and check about the star activity and the compatibility buffers. All these things we have to think. So now like we have cut the insert and this one. So this is like after cutting, the overhangs will be like this, and the overhangs will form a base pairing, but still like there is a nick between this A to T. There is no joining. So this is done by the DNA ligases. So then it will form a particular perfect plasmid for our system. So this joining of this end, the phosphodiester bond, is carried out by the ligases. And before that, some people after the restriction digestion, to prevent this recirculation of the plasmid, they do like the SIP treatment also, which prevents the vector self-ligating. Because this removes the phosphate, we need a phosphate and the OH for the ligation to happen. So in that way, like they prevent like this self-ligation. But some people will not do that SIP treatment. After this restriction digestion, there will be like this will the overhangs will form a hydrogen bond, and this using this TNA ligases we found a phosphodiester bond. Then the complete circular plasmid will be ready. So like this ligation also we have to be very careful with. There are several factors influencing the ligation, like for example the concentration of the enzyme and the reactants, and the plasmid and the cut plasmid and the gene, the 1:5 proportion, and temperature of the reaction. Because when it comes to the temperature of the reaction, there will be like some based on the enzyme, some temperature will be like optimal, and based on the cohesive ends, temperature will be like differing. So we should have a compromise between these temperatures. Usually like people do like 16 degrees for 1 hour, or sometimes people like before like they keep at 16 degrees for 1 hour, and then they overnight keep 4 degrees, and then again they will do a ligation for 1 hour at 16 degree, and then they will do the transformation. So this like depends on your like whichever thing works for you, like, but you have to try all this thing. And one more thing is that like we have ATPs in the buffer, so that stability is also we have to think. So these are like some of the factors when you think of the ligation. And so now like the vector, the insert, everything joined together by ligation, and then we have to transform this into a host organism. So usually for the this type of cloning, like we use like not all the strains will be possible for the cloning. So most of the cases like DH5 alpha, top 10 are the strains which are used for the cloning purpose. For the expression, strains are different, but for the cloning purpose, the thing is like these strains will have like some mutation. For example, this DH5 alpha and the top 10, they have like some RECK mutation and NDA mutation. So this thing prevents the cutting of the DNA. The endonucleases prevents the cutting of the DNA inside the host, and like RECK will prevent the homologous recombination. Otherwise, the genes can be like at different place. So only at appropriate place, this transcription will be initiated, right? So to prevent these things, like we should have like for the cloning purpose, to maintain the plasmid stability and all these things, we should carry out the transformation only in some type of E. coli host strains like the DH5 alpha top 10. So the bacterial transformation, like I will explain when it comes to the protein expression, that time I will explain in detail. This is just the plasmid is taken up by the E. coli cell. That is called the transformation. So like now, like we plate in antibiotic resistant plate, and then like we do the competent cell. In the competent cell, we add the DNA, and then after this this thing, like we incubate for some time, and then like this will be plated onto a antibiotic plate. So only when your plasmid is present inside the host cell, that only should give the colonies. But sometimes like due to some reasons we get this, but we have to screen them like. So but this is the procedure. Now you have like you have done the ligation, and then you have transformed. And in this case, like when it comes to cloning, the competent cell efficiency is very important. We should have a high efficient competent cell. So then only like you will be able to get a clone. So like we have to use some rubidium chloride method or commercially available competent cells. So then like we can get a good chances of getting the clone. So now we have the clone ready, and we have to confirm the clone either by colony PCR screening. We can check whether the insert is there, because insert will be like 1000 base pairs. Empty plasmids will not have that. So based on that colony PCR, or you do a restriction digestion and you will see 1000 base pair release or 1500 base pair release. And finally, we have to confirm this by DNA sequencing. So now like we have the clone ready. So the plasmid or the vector is ready like for the expression. So the first step in the recombinant protein production is done. So we have the construct which is ready for the like for the work. So now the construct is ready. So now we have to focus on the host cells. Host cells, as I said, they are the factories, like the factories for the expression. So different types of host cells are there. The bacterial expression system, yeast expression system, insect expression system, mammalian expression system. So based on the clone we produced, so like we can choose which is the expression system. For example, PET, if you use like this will be like a bacterial expression system. If you use a Pichia plasmid like or the PPIC9, something like that, we can go for. So this is already decided, and the expression system based on the cloning, like this is all already decided. So And none of the expression system is completely fine, because each one will have its downs and ups. So it depends, like choosing the expression system depends again on the target protein property, what is your application, and what is the protein yield you require, and how much financially you are like well in doing the experiment, and what is the post translational modifications it requires. So these are the things which decide the expression host system selection. So like for example, the bacteria, like it's a comparison chart, like where the speed of expression in bacterial system is high, because in 2 days you can get. In this, like it's not that so fast, because we need 5 days or something. The insect is like even more like longer, and the mammalian system is the most complex. And the yield is also like a compromise between these two. Like in some cases the speed is nice, in some cases the yield is better. But in some, for example, in bacterial, the post translational modification, most of the post translational modification we cannot carry out, except like this disulfide bond, like that also with difficulty. So we have to decide whether we needed what the post translation modification is important, then like we cannot go for bacterial expression. So these are the things like which decide which expression host we use for our study. And ours is the bacterial expression system. Like, so the bacterial expression system, it has many advantages because it has a clear genetic background. The genetic background is well studied. What all the operons, like the lac operons, the tryptophan operons, how the metabolism of these organisms are well studied. So in that case, you will you can design more strategies to have a better vector. Though, so this is one advantages. And the E. coli, the dividing time is 20 minutes, so it is fast. And the media ingredients are not that much expensive, so it's low cost, and we get a very high expression level and easy purification. So these are all the things, advantages with the bacterial expression system. So the disadvantages is the post-translational modification. And if you go beyond 50 kilodaltons, I don't think like we will be able to produce a good protein with this. So when your protein limit is within this, then we can go for the bacterial expression. And then membrane proteins also, it would be very difficult to produce in the bacterial expression system. So like and the expression strain, the host cells, they will be like, as I said, for cloning there are some mutations like RECK, endonuclease, NDA like mutation. So the expression strain also will carry some mutation. For example, this OMP, it is a outer membrane protease. So this will be mutated, so it will not be able to cleave the proteins. Like it prevents the proteolytic activity. And ion protease mutation, and they have like this HSD mutations, like which is also like some kind of mutation which should be present in these strains to help them to produce a like good quality protein. So this expression strain, some of the common mutations are like are there, like in the E. coli. We have to do these mutations. So these are the some strain terminologies, like for example, as I said, this gal means like there is a mutation in this galactose metabolism, and LAC5 like that. So for different purposes, like they will carry out the mutation in the E. coli genome to help the organism to produce like more protein, or like the good quality protein. So we should understand these when you are choosing for example, if you are choosing a BL21DE3, so then we can check what all the genomic mutations, the genetic makeup it has, and why we cannot use the system for cloning, and why we can use for protein expression. But if you are using a toxic protein, like which is the better strain. So this strain terminologies also, like we should understand a bit for the like for the protein expression. It will help you in selecting the perfect E. coli strain for your expression. So these are the common expression expression host strains which are available like in the market, this DL21DE3, DL21. So they each have a different purpose. Like for example, this DL21DE3, if you are using a PET vector, we have to use this kind of strain which has this DE3, because as I said, this PET expression system has a T7 promoter, right? It needs T7 RNA polymerase. So this DE3, if you have, like, then it shows that this E. coli strain is able to produce a T7 RNA polymerase, which recognizes the T7 promoter. So we cannot use a DH5 alpha for a PET vector as an expression strain. So, and this P-lyse, yes, like it has an additional control for the tite regulation. And there are like some strains like C41DE3 or C43DE3. They have like some uncharacterized mutation in the genome DNA of the E. coli. So, which helps the E. coli to tolerate toxic protein production. So, if you have like a membrane protein or like a protein which is toxic to E. coli, so then we can select, instead of this DL21DE3, we can go for the C41DE3 or the C43DE3. And there are like some strains, this Rosetta strains, like where, like, for example, this is like important when you are expressing a human protein in E. coli, because there, like, you know, like some amino acids are coded by more than one codon, right? And some of the codons are not available in the E. coli system. So, for example, if you are expressing a human protein in this, if you are doing a gene synthesis, then we can have the gene with the codon optimization for E. coli. But if you are like taking from some other source where the optimization is not, the gene, the codon optimization is not done, in that cases, like they should have like the strain which helps to produce this rare codons. So this cases, like this Rosetta strain, we have to, like, when you are expressing a human protein or something, we can select this strain for your expression. So the codon plus, those strains are like for the like expressing the human protein. They will have the additional tRNA genes to produce this rare codon for your expression. So based on your the insert, we can select the different strains like for your expression needs. So now, like, we have selected the clone and the expression organism, or also we have selected. So this is how the PET vector expression works actually. So what happens? What happens is your vector, this is the PET vector, and this is the E. coli genomic DNA. So this is the T7 RNA polymerase. So, but this T7, like we have T7 promoter, which is recognized by the T7 RNA polymerase, not by the E. coli RNA polymerase. So we have to introduce this gene, DE3 gene, which produces this T7 RNA polymerase under the control of the LAC promoters. Like, so before you add IPTG in your media, this LAC-I gene will be produced, and this will prevent the E. coli RNA polymerase to produce the T7 RNA polymerase. Only when you have a T7 RNA polymerase, here this expression. So when you induce this system with IPTG, after some growth stage, if you induce this system with IPTG, then this LAC repressor gene is removed from both the sides. And then, like, this will also produce a T7 RNA polymerase, and this T7 RNA polymerase will bind to your promoter region in the vector, and it will start the protein transcription and translation. So this is how the PET vector system developed. So, and in, as I said, to have an additional control of this expression, like to prevent the leaky expression in case of toxic proteins, like, so after going to some stage only, like the plasmid should start producing your protein. To have a control, tight control of it, there are like this P-lyse BL21DE3 P-lyse S strains. So there they have this additional plasmid apart from your PET plasmid. They have this additional plasmid which produces the T7 lysozyme, and this T7 lysozyme is inactivates the T7 RNA polymerase. Only there is no basal expression of this T7 RNA polymerase. Only when the induction starts, the T7 polymerase will be active, and then it will start your protein production. So to have a tight control of your expression, these things are modified in the E. coli strains to get your good quality proteins. And the method of gene transfer, like as I said, like there are the different methods depending on the host: transformation, conjugation, electroporation, transfection, direct transfer. Like, so the uptake of plasmid DNA by E. coli is called the transformation. So we will little bit about this also, like we will discuss. Like, so like introduction of DNA into host cell, there are two problems actually. So the cell membrane is there, which prevents this uptake of this plasmid. And once inside the host cell also, the DNA should be able to replicate. These are the two problems. So to uptake of the DNA like is done by making the recipient bacteria competent. So like what happens in this competent cell production is, so what happens is like the E. coli cell membrane has lipopolysaccharides. They are also negatively charged, and the plasmid is also negatively charged because this phosphodiester, like they are also like negatively charged. This prevents the negatively charged interactions, prevent the DNA to come closer to the cell membrane. So to prevent that, we have to treat with the positively charged ions like rubidium chloride, like calcium chloride. So once we treat the cells, on the cell surface, there will be like the positively charged ions. So the plasmid DNA can come close to the cell membrane. And then like we have to, even the cell pores will not be like open up that time. So we have to give a temporary heat shock, which opens up the pores. So then during that period, it enters into the E. coli host. So after that, immediately we have to like put an ice, because otherwise the pores will be like open for a long time and the bacteria will die. So we have to quickly give the heat shock and then put back the in ice, and then we have to add the media, and then we should start growing. This process is called like preparing the competent cells, and then the transformation. So now you have done the transformation, and then E. coli host is like ready for the protein production. So this is the transformation procedure. You add the plasmid DNA, and then you give heat shock, and then immediately add the growth medium, and then grow for 1 hour, and then you plate on a plate containing antibiotic. Then you select the colonies, and from that colonies we have to do the protein the protein expression step. So you have the colonies, and overnight you streak the colonies you inoculate into the overnight culture. And from small scale culture, we have to do a large scale culture. And then once after some period point of OD 0.8 or something, we have to induce, so that the E. coli will start producing the protein which is encoded in the plasmid. So once the induction starts, some people they keep like for 37 degree, like for 3 hours, 6 hours. And some people, if it is a membrane, if it's a toxic protein or like membrane protein, they lower the temperature to 20 degrees and then keep them overnight, allowing the time for the to produce the perfectly folded protein. So it depends on, again, like which protein like we wanted to use. So once when the protein is expressed, and we have to harvest the cells and do a lysis by sonication, and then like we have to use the supernatant for your further purification studies in case the proteins are soluble fraction. But in some cases, lot of protein will be produced, or if it's a toxic protein, it will go to a inclusion bodies. In that case, we have to purify from the inclusion bodies. So guidelines also, like we should, like what is the objective, like what how much protein will be there, like or what is the purpose of this, it's a therapeutic use for therapeutic purpose or for some other purpose. And we have to, in the purification, we have to minimize the number of steps, because with most cases, in one purification, we will not get enough purified protein. So we have to use another purification step, but we have to make less number of purification step, because every step you will be losing some protein, and every step you will be exposing the protein to higher temperature, which is not good for your protein. So, and we have to check by, in small scale also, we have to check this protein purification. And then, like, after getting the protein also, we should have some analytical assays whether the protein is active or inactive, like, so these are the things which you should, before going for the protein purification, we should have a like some idea about these things. So, so how pure my protein, like whether, what is the purpose of your protein, like whether it's a therapeutic purpose, or it's for some crystallography studies, or it's for, so depending on that, like the purity, required purity is also like varies. And the basic scheme of protein purification is like, first step is the preparation extraction. This we discussed. Like we grow the cells over, for some time, and then we pellet down the cells, and we do the cell lysis, and then we remove the cell debris, and the supernatant we use in case of soluble protein. Or if it is a cell pellet, we have to go for the inclusion body purification. We have to solubilize the inclusion body, and then we have to purify. This is the preparation stage. And then next stage is the capture state. Some cases, like where we do like ammonium sulfate precipitation, those kind of things, like we do like to remove the contaminants. And then like we go for the intermediate purification, like for example this Histac purification. And then for the polishing stage, we go for the gel filtration and those things. So this is the general strategy for the protein purification. So, like in choosing the method for your protein purification also involves the physical and chemical properties of the protein, how soluble your protein is, how big is your protein, whether it has surface exposed hydrophobic residue, or the charged surface residues and its isoelectric point. Those are all the things which plays an important role in deciding the method of purification. So these are the different types of protein purification. Affinity purification, like which is based on the affinity of some ligand binding to the like column. And there are like depending on the hydrophobicity of hydrophobic amino acids on the surface, we have this hydrophobic interaction. Depending on the charge of the the protein, like we can choose ion exchange chromatography. And depending on the size of the protein, like we can choose this size exclusion. And each method has its like the positive points and the negative points. Like we can combine several methods to get a good quality protein. So briefly we will discuss about this as well. Like so the most commonly used method is like this affinity. At least for the R&D purposes, most of the labs like use this method, like this affinity. It depends on like, so you have a solid resin matrix, like and where like the ligand will be there, and then the protein like which has the ligand for the matrix like will bind. Other impurities will not be able to bind. So the other impurities will be washed out during the washing. And then like if you have a other ligand, for example in case of Histac protein, like we use imidazole. This imidazole will replace the histidine the histidine bound protein. Then like your pure protein will be coming out of the elution fraction. So this is the case, like metal affinity chromatography. So the histidines are similar to this imidazole group. Like so this nickel has an affinity towards this histidine, but we need, for the purification purpose, we need a continuous stretch of Histac. Like that's why like we use a 6 to 7 histidine amino acids at the C terminal or the N terminal. So like your ligand will have this nickel ion, like where this will bound to the histidine packed protein. So this is the case when your protein is there, like there will be several ligands, right? Like, so this will be binding to this matrix, and this In that way, it will be like holded onto the column. And then when you use a imidazole, which has much more affinity, higher affinity towards this nickel, it will be replaced by your protein. So this is one method which is very commonly used in the laboratory. Like in this also, like as I said, this is divided into two, right? Like if you have a soluble fraction, this will like directly, like the soluble fraction will bind to the nickel NTR-SN, and then you wash with the low concentration of imidazole to remove the lightly bound impurities, and then like you elute with high concentration of the imidazole to get your protein of interest. In case of inclusion bodies, we have to solubilize the inclusion bodies in guanidinium chloride or the chaotropic agents, and then like we have to bind this solubilized inclusion bodies in this way, the same way, but it will be like under the denaturing condition. The things we have to be careful with this is like DDT and all, like we should not use too much, because this will prevent the binding of the histag protein. And then like optimal resin we should use, like we should not use excess resin, because this will enable like more impurities to bind on the surface. So if like 1 ml or 2 ml for a normal 1 liter culture should be fine. We should not use more. And like the pH of the buffer should be above 8, then only the binding will happen. So, and for the elution we can reduce, but if you want to have a binding, like it should be above the neutral pH. So these things we have to be careful. Otherwise, it's a very straightforward method, and it gives good purity, like which is like sufficient for most of the R&D works in academic labs and many labs. So this is like the most commonly used method nowadays for protein purification. But the industry purposes, maybe they have a different criteria. Like so, for the normal R&D labs, this is the most commonly used method. And yeah, it's a very easy purification, and we don't have the limitation with the sample size and all these things. We can it's compatible with the number of buffers. Even this like we can use guanidinium chloride, all these things are tolerable, so it does not affect the structure of the protein. So this is like one of the most commonly used method actually, like in the recombinant protein purification, like where you have a histag and purification will be. And then like for the further characterization also, by Western blotting they have anti-His antibodies. So we can if you are like because this anti-His will be like common to all the proteins, right? So the histag proteins, it will be easy to see whether the protein produced is the your protein of interest. Those kind of things are also like possible. And then the histag is a very small fusion tag. If it is there in the C dash end or the C terminal or the N terminal, it does not cause much problem to your structure. Like so, like in terms of its function also, it does not alter much. So it's like a good tag to be used for the recombinant protein expression. So ion exchange is based on the charge based separation. So this thing is like there are like cation exchanger and the anion exchanger. So cation exchangers are usually like cellulose. The matrix is this, and then if you have a negatively charged functional group, it is the cation exchanger, because the proteins like which are like positively charged will bind to this one, and then like you can replace this protein with positively charged sodium ions. And the anion exchangers are like the matrix will be positively charged and the proteins will be negatively charged, and so this will be replaced with the chloride ion. So the choice of this and this for example, this methyl sulfonate sulfonide groups are like the strong exchangers, and the carboxymethyl, those the carboxylate kind of things are the weak exchangers. Here in this anion exchanger, the quaternary amines are like a strong exchanger, and the diethyl, those kind of amines are the weak exchangers. So like this is the interaction. For example, like if a cation exchange resin, this is the resin, you have a positive like positively charged functional group. So this will be replaced by the positively charged from the protein. This will be binding to that. And then like we use like sodium chloride, the gradient elution, and then like the protein will be also like eluted later on. So the selection of the cation exchanger or the anion exchanger depends like on the pI value and the stability of your protein. For example, like if your protein pI value is 6 or something, and 7 or something, and if the protein is stable below like your pI, so then we have to use for the, we have to go for the cation exchanger. So below the pI value, like all the proteins will be positively charged, and above the pI values, they will be negatively charged. So in whichever pH range your protein is stable, accordingly we can choose the cation or the anion exchange chromatography. And you should also, like if it is a, if you choose a cation exchanger, the buffer should be like 1 unit below the pI of your protein. And if it is an anion exchange column chromatography, the pI, the buffer pH should be 1 unit above the pI of your protein. So these are the small things we have to consider: the stability of the protein and the pH of the buffers, and the buffer usage also, like for use cationic buffers in case of anion exchanger, because anion exchanger, the matrix will be positively charged, right? So if your buffer contains like negatively charged, then that will be replaced. So the buffer selection also depending on your chromatography of like we have to select the buffers. Like, so these are the things like which we should consider when it comes to an exchange: the stability of the protein at the pA of your protein, and which condition the protein is stable, and we can use this. It's also like after this, the disadvantage with that will be like from lower concentration of the ionic strength, we will go for the higher ionic strength, which is not like for your further studies. For example, 1 molar sodium chloride or something, the buffer which will not be ideal for your study. So this would be like disadvantages, but we can combine with other techniques, like afterwards we can do a dialysis to remove this thing, or after this we can go for the hydroxy or like HIC, hydrophobic interaction chromatography, or after this step we can go for gel filtration. So to the there we can use the optimal buffer, which is useful for your store the protein. Like these things, like we have to mix and match. So after which step we have to use, and like we cannot do a gel filtration before like anion chromatography. Those kind of small tricks we have to think of like in the protein purification process. So, and this gel filtration is based on the size. So larger the protein, it will come out of the beads, and then the smaller the size of the protein, it will go through the beads, and then you will have a separation based on the size. So here also, like there are like some advantages and disadvantages, where like, because this, like your sample size should be very small, and like it will get diluted your protein. So like but you will get a pure protein. Like, so depending, like you should have some strategies, which one, like after this gel purification, like if it's usually this will be a fine tuning process. After that we have to concentrate the protein. Those kind of steps we have to take actually in the protein purification process, because one method will not give like a completely pure protein. And sometimes, like for example, this histidine purification will give like a good quality protein. There, like after that we can do a dialysis to remove the imidazole. Like we have to like think, like as I said, what is the purpose? If it's a therapeutic purpose, then definitely some more steps are used. But if it is for structural studies, where like this much is enough, like we can go for one purification. We have to choose the purification steps based on the the target of your, like what purpose is that for the protein. Okay, so, and yeah, like after the purification also, we have to like check for some interfering contaminants, and we have to concentrate your protein. without precipitation is happening, we have to think of adding some additives, and what is the storage buffer and what is the storage condition. And it's always good to flash freeze the protein, so once you get the purified protein in the required, like after the concentration and everything, if you want to store at minus 80 degree, it's good to flash freeze the protein. Flash freezing is you have to put immediately in the liquid nitrogen, because it prevents the formation of this ice crystals. So this flash freezing the protein helps you to have an active protein for a long time. So, and then we can confirm the protein by mass spectrometry, and you can check the activity of the protein. So these are the final steps in the protein purifications. So, and these are some ways to check your protein purification, like SDS page or the Western blotting. You can check the concentration by calorimetric assays, and then we can develop some immunoassays also, if you have an antibody to it. So these kind of things are also we can check the protein purification. So on the whole, we have to consider these are the things which we should think. So which protein construct we want to express, and whether it requires a codon optimization in case of mammalian protein. What are the cloning strategies we can use? What should be the ideal promoter for your system? What kind of fusion tag we have to use, and which expression host would be better? And even in the bacterial expression host also, which strain we should use, and whether we need if a protein is not folding properly, whether we have to co-express with some molecular chevrons, and which purification methods we have to choose based on the stability and the size properties. We can choose the purification method. And if you have some fusion tag, which is the best method to cleave the fusion tag, because some protease will not be for example, this factor, if you use thrombin and all, the cleavage efficiency would be very less. But if you use a TEF protease, the cleavage efficiency would be much higher. So we have to think different strategies, how much amount of protein. But if you require a small protein, that should be small amount of protein, that should be fine. But if you require large amount, then these things also we have to consider, and which buffer we should store it, and then the proper condition to store it. So each protein is unique, and we should exploit the differences to get your protein. So there are potential problems, but always there will be promoter strength, mRNA stabilities, translational issues, but there will be always some solution for it. So explore multiple approaches from the vast combination of the genetic toolbox, and understanding the cellular machinery properly and using it will help you to have a better chance of success. So, and good luck with all your protein experiments, and all the best for your work. And then I should say my startup is not some kind of innovation or startup or something. It's basically during my PhD days or the postdoctoral days, the bottleneck of my research is this, the protein, getting a good quality protein. Basically, I am a protein NMR person, so you need a large amount of protein. So which was really a very critical thing for my research. That time I really thought that's a blocking stone in my career. But because of that, I explored multiple things, because this is not working, I tried this one. So this gave me an opportunity to learn different aspects of this protein expression, especially in the E. coli cells. So right now this forms the basis, right? So once, which I consider as a blocking stone, is now a stepping stone for my career. Based on that, I started a company, and then slowly we are improving. So whatever things bother you at this moment, please don't lose hope. Who knows, in later case, this should be a boon for you. Whichever is blocking your path can be a stepping stone. So always do not lose faith, and try different strategies, and explore things. So all the best for your work, and thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the valuable presentation. I could see more than 300 participants are actively attending these sessions.
Okay.
Yes. Most of the participants are asking for this presentation. Participants, please go to our YouTube channel where you can find our videos. or you can directly reach Dr. Saumani Kumaran. Ma'am,
Yeah, I
please,
can share the presentation.
yeah, please share your mail ID in the chat box so that they can easily reach you.
Yeah, I'm sharing my mail ID and this thing in the chat box,
Yes,
and
yes.
you can uh, I can give the presentation as well, like, or else I can give it to Dinesh also, like, so he can share it also, like, that's also like fine. Okay. Yeah, I will. Yeah.
So before move on to Q&A, I would like to raise the poll window. Participants, please poll your votes. Ma'am, can you please take the Q&A?
Yeah. So pet vectors, like, not leaky, like, yeah, they have a tight regulation, because to start your transcription, we need a T7 RNA polymerase, which is under the control of this genetic regulation. So that's why, and they also have, like, to have an additional control, they also have this P lys S version strains, like, to have a prevent the leaky expression. Leaky expression in the sense, like, before induction, your protein should not be expressed. So only when you add an IPTG, like, then only the expression should start. Because in case of toxic proteins, like, if the toxic proteins are produced, then the E. coli will not grow up to the state, because we need for the protein production also, we need some cell density, right? So for that, like, we need some optimal cell growth to produce. So we should prevent the leaky expression. For that, the pet vectors have different strategies to prevent the how fusion protein and synthetic promoters, like, helping. Yeah, fusion protein is for the promoters is like for the transcriptional level control. Fusion protein is to give a stability or a solubility to a like a protein of interest. So what is the most suitable vector to get soluble protein maximally? So that's what, like, we cannot soluble proteins mostly with the normal pet vectors which is available without fusion also, like, should be like fine, because it does not need a soluble fusion tag. So a normal pet vector which has a his tag should be fine, and the BL21D3 should help. Only when there is a problem with your protein solubility, then we need the other strategies like fusion vector, or like some other strain. Like, for example, if you have a disulfide bond, we have to go for like the origami strains, like origami strain, which prevents the, because the cytoplasmic environment is reducing condition. So we cannot have a disulfide bond in cytoplasm. So this kind of mutations in the genomic strains of the E. coli helps to produce a more soluble protein. So for the soluble protein, if it is a soluble protein, then the normal pet vector, like, without any fusion track, should be like in the formulations we are adding many things whenever. Yeah, we have to play with like, for example, like, what all the additives we need for your, like, what buffer you should store. It's a what pH it should be stored, like whether we have to add like BME, or we have to add like some additives like sucrose or something to make glycerol or something to. So we have to add different things, like, to get your protein stable for a long time. So, and then, like, so this melting temperature of the primers, usually, like, when you go for a sigma like order or something, like, we don't have to order, but just go to their website and then, like, click on like put the primer sequence, it will give all the details, like whether like what is the TM of the primer, whether it has some secondary structures. Those kind of information we can get from and there are like different primer designing sites also. Primer 3, like even the NCBI have this primer blast to check the primer uniqueness. You can use this online tool to get the information about this primers. Is there any effect on tokens? Yeah, the expression of particular proteins depends on the environment, the conditions in the. So it both actually, like it depends on the promoter as well, like the tight regulation, and then like the protein nature also, like because like if your protein the mRNA sequence is more prone to cleavage, then like you will not be able to produce. It's we cannot say one factor to the protein production. It's a combination of multiple tools, like to have a good protein. So we cannot say only one factor for the good protein production. So reverse primer. So reverse primer, it is like whatever the, like it should be like always this primer design should be like in the 5-3- end. So reverse primer is like one end, like forward, the start of the protein sequence, the DNA sequence, and this reverse primer should be the towards the 3- end. It should be a reverse complement of the coding sequence. So this is the strategy for the reverse primer. The factors which express the particular protein difference. Just a minute. So yeah, several factors are there, like which affects the expression of a particular protein. Like it's the nature of the protein itself, it's the nature of the host. Because like if you want to express some other with proteins which has post-translational modification, this will not be good in mammalian. Like it will not be good in E. coli. We have to choose for mammalian. So there are several factors which express the for example, if it's a membrane protein, it will go to an inclusion body, and if it needs like if it is a protein contains like multiple prolines, this will also affect your protein production, because like the folding will be affected. There are like several factors, like, and the temperature also, and whether it is toxic to the E. coli. Like these are like several factors which influence the protein expression. Which make should be preferred for the conducting recombinant protein expression. So usually like the vectors we buy this in vitrogen, the PET vectors, like the enzymes and all, it is good to buy from NEB. And I think this cost and all we will discuss personally, like GMP good and its potential cost in India, like chemicals used in yeah, chemical cleavage is like it's a bit tricky, because this cyanogen bromide, all these things are like we have to do it carefully, like so mostly, like, and then there should not be any internal methionine. So most of the cases the chemical cleavage is like restricted. Only some proteins we can do this, but then like we have to go for the enzymatic cleavage. But in some cases, if you want to use for functional structural studies, still like you can refold it in changing the buffer. So it depends on your protein and what is the purpose of your study, like so we can decide like which cleavage we have to use. And so in E. coli, the optimal size of the insert like should be the protein size. If it is more than 45 kilodaltons, like it would be difficult in E. coli cells. Then we have to go for the different expression system. But below that, like 45 to 50 kilodaltons, still that the E. coli expression should be fine. The DNA ligase, what are the uses? DNA ligase is to join the end. So like after the restriction digestion, there will be like patching up of the vector and the insert, but there will be a nick in the plasmid. This nick will be joined by the DNA ligases. So then you will have a complete circularized plasmid. And the most suitable temperature, as I said, because there are so most of the people, what they do is 16 hours for 1 day, 1 hour they keep, and then do the further proceed with the experiment. But in some cases, if the ligation is not happening, what people do is like they keep for 16 degrees for 1 hour, and then overnight they keep at 4 degrees for in a refrigerator, and then again before transformation they will do this ligation like at 16 degree. So we have to explore actually, like, because this depends on the ligase enzyme and the cohesive ends, the TM. So all these things are a factor, and the buffer also, like, we should not like we should aliquot this buffer, especially because it contains ATP, and the DTT is also needed for the activity. So the buffer we should aliquot it, because each thaw, and when you do thawing for each time, then the activity reduces. So the enzyme and the buffer, like, we have to store properly, and these are also like very important. And difference among the artificial vector, like based on the, so the cloning vectors, like yeah, we don't need, like, just we note the cloning, like, to get the sequence details and all like that. They are all like the cloning vectors, but when we want to express a protein, we have to have some elements in the plasmids. They are called the expression vectors. Like, the role of CaCl2 is like, as I said, the bacterial membrane is negatively charged. And when we have like the plasmid also, the DNA, it's also negatively charged. So they repel each other. So will not be the bacteria will not be able to take up the plasmid under normal conditions. So to avoid this negatively charged interaction, we have to make the cell competent. So by adding this calcium chloride or the rubidium chloride to the bacterial cells, uh, the negatively charged lipopolysaccharides will be like added with this positively charged calcium ion. So the negative, like this interactions will not be like will not be there, and the DNA, like the plasmid DNA, will be closer to the cell membrane. So this helps like in bacterial transformation, and then we have to give a heat shock to open up the pore. Then this plasmids will be intaken. Host cell, because for example, when you use a pet vector, then we have to have some system like BL21DE3, because we need a T7 RNA polymerase. But if you have some other vector which uses the E. coli RNA polymerase, then we can go for even the DH5 alpha. So it depends on which plasmid system and what is the, like, usually the provider will provide the host cell specificity also, like, and without strain, the E. coli cannot. I didn't understand the question actually. Uh, so this gateway cloning and all are like, yeah, maybe I think like we will discuss in detail in personal, Mr. Parthiban Subramanian. Like then we can discuss about this gateway cloning as well. So like usually this magnesium chloride will be added in the media for the competent cell. So, and the most commonly used ions are the calcium ions and the rubidium chloride ions. But magnesium chloride also we will add in the growth stage for the competent cell. The yield, it depends on like the protein actually, because like some cases, like even from 1 liter culture, you will get a lot of protein. It depends on the protein, like it depends on the conditions what we use. Like yield is definitely depending on the it depends on the, several things. Like we cannot guarantee like this will give like this much yield. So we have to play around actually. Like the role of DE3 gene is like, so this DE3 gene is the one which produces the T7 RNA polymerase, which is required for the transcription initiation. This binds to the T7 promoter in your plasmid, and this will start the transcription. So this is the role of the DE3 gene in the E. coli host. So when you are using a PET vector, then definitely we have to use some strain which has the DE3 gene. Otherwise, it will not, this T7 promoter will not be recognized by the E. coli RNA polymerase. So we need a T7 RNA polymerase, and only when you have this E3 gene incorporated into the genome of the E. coli, then we can have the T7 RNA polymerase. So this BL21DE3 and P-lysase, the difference is like the P-lysase has an additional plasmid which produces T7 lysozyme, and this T7 lysozyme binds to the T7 RNA polymerase. Before induction, if some T7 RNA polymerase is produced, this will inactivate that T7 RNA polymerase. So it prevents the leaky expression, because leaky expression could be a problem when it is if it is a toxic protein, because then it will stop the cell to grow. Then you will, only when cells grow, you will be able to produce large amount of protein. So in that case, we have to, like, if it is a toxic protein, we have to go for BL21 D3 P-lysase. So it has an additional control for the leaky expression. And yes, we can do the project like PPT. Yes, I will share like. Yeah, like if the origin of replication, it's the stringent or the relaxed plasmid depends on the origin of replication. So if we have a different origin of replication, like for example, this PUC vectors like have the origin of like that kind of origin of replication, then we will have like a more relaxed plasmid. So when you are designing a plasmid on your own, not from the commercial vector, then you can use this origin of that. You can select the origin of replication or which antibiotic you want to use, what all the multiple cloning sites you can avoid. You can design in that way. Gel filtration is based on the size. Like if you have like, for example, if you have a 25 kilodalton impurity, like from a 75 kilodalton, then you can exploit the size difference. Like then we can use, it's mainly depend on the pore size like of the matrix, and then like if it is a very large protein, then it will come out of the, if it is the protein size is larger than the pore size, then it will come out of that easily. And then like only like the proteins which are of the pore size will pass through them like with difficulties. The small size will like will come faster, and based on the size, like it elutes at different times. Then we can, based on the size, we can use this gel filtration. What are the strategies for the survival of the plasmid? Survival of the plasmid is like, as I said, in DH5 alpha, like we have this REC-A mutation and then ENDA-A mutation, and like if you have a like which prevents the cleavage and of this plasmid DNA, and then if you have a origin of replication like which produces high copy numbers, then the plasmids will be like higher. And then we have this antibiotic selection also, like because this antibiotic selection pressure is there when you add, like so continuously this plasmid will be produced. These are the strategies used for the survival of the plasmids. The post-translational modification, because like some cases they are like essential for the activity. For example, some disulfide bonds are required for the proper structure of the protein, like, and some glycosylation is needed for like activity of the protein. That's why like if that is not like interfering with your activity of the protein, then like we don't have to worry about this. But in cases where this post-translation modification affects your activity, then we have to give importance to that. Yeah, food industries also like there are several proteins used in the like processing of the food, like amylase and so many things like are also like used. But yeah, again we have to like be careful with the selection of the host, because you are using it in the food, like so which is like generally grass. Those kind of regulations we have to um think how fusion protein increases the stability. So fusion protein increases the stability. For example, sometimes like when you add towards the C terminal and like it prevents the cleavage, and sometimes when you add like it increases the folding of your protein. Like so, in that case, like it will prevent the escape from the proteases. So different aspects, this fusion proteins helps in the to increase the protein solubility or the stability. So definitely we can help when you have a proposal. Yeah, definitely we can sit together and then like think of what kind of strategies we have to. So starting recipe for protein folding. So the thing is like there are like different additives in the buffer. We can try small scale small scale studies with your protein in different some starting buffers we should use, whether like for the phosphate buffer with different amount of sodium chloride and different additives, like so we can categorically we have to do. It's a long step, but we have to like do it in a small scale, like so for the protein refolding. After uh, single step purification, like purification in the sense like I don't know whether he means like a histidine purification, then definitely yes we can go for like FPLC purification. What type of protein post translational modification we should be careful. Like the thing is like if the post translation modification affects your activity, then like activity of the protein, then we have to be careful. Methods of screening, like RNA PCR, like the restriction digestion, and then like this blue white screening, and you can go for DNA. Finally it will be the DNA sequencing of your construct, will be the confirmation for the yes, internship I will provide. Uh, I'm producing inclusion bodies. So inclusion bodies, we have to solubilize the inclusion bodies, and then like by using chiotropic agents, and then like on column we can like reduce the chiotrop agent, and then like you can purify in a native buffer. Slowly, like from 6 molar guanidinium chloride, you can reduce to 4 molar, 2 molar, and then slowly we can reduce completely the guanidinium chloride. That way, like we can purify the protein from inclusion bodies. So what can be the reason for, yeah, even though regulations are there, but you know some of the like because the E. coli missionary also will have like some process going on which is similar to that for the like, so some lactose will be like there which will like start a basal expression. So like this basal expression thing, like we cannot have much control. So only like when you use some special strategies we can yeah. So I think most of the, so the F plus and F negative E. coli, like you have to like check the genetic strains, like because the F plus is the ability to transfer the information. The F minus will not have that this thing. So you usually like we can, when you have this DH5 alpha or like the VL21, they will introduce that genetic in the gene description. They will they will put whether it is an F plus or the F minus strain, the skin. Like we have to look at this information. Like so, the most common is the E. coli, but there are also like some bacteria like and actinomyces, some things like that. Also, like people do like bacillus and. But yeah, most of the cases we use E. coli like. So, but in special cases, they are also like there are also using like some other bacterial expression. Yeah, I think most of the questions I read, I guess, Dinesh. Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, I can hear you.
So I think it's most of the things are answered, I guess. So, but yeah, in case if they have like some doubts, like maybe they will ask, uh, like they can send me a personal email, and then we can have a one-to-one conversation. So that would be nice, right? Like,
Have you shared your mail ID, ma'am?
just a minute.
Okay.
So, Dinesh, can you write in the chat box my email ID? It's not coming here. Like,
No problem. I will can write.
write my email ID, and then like my cell phone number also should be fine. So only the Q&A option I am seeing. Yeah, okay, chat. So have you,
I'm done sharing, ma'am.
oh, okay. So I have shared my email ID, Dinesh.
No problem, ma'am. I also shared.
Yeah.
So I once again thank you, ma'am, for being part of today's session. So, ma'am, anything else?
Yeah, I think like it's fine. Like I hope it is useful for the attendees. Like
Yeah,
so,
sure, ma'am.
thanks for the opportunity, and thanks a lot for all the attendees, and all the best for your work. Thanks a lot. Have a
Thank you
nice
all.
day.
Thank you all. I end this webinar.